Vallabha Giribardhari Yasoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaira Dhamadhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahamsa Parvadikacharya, Tathagata Shri Śrimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki, Grantaraj Śrimad Bhāgavatam Ki, Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki, Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Govinda. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimmirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamhayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Yuta Pada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhunam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we are on Canto 3, Chapter 24, Text 35. Shri Bhagavan Vacham Maya Proktam Hilokasya Pramanam Satyalokike Atajani Mayatubhyam Yad Avocham Ritam Mune Shri Bhagavan Uvacham Maya Proktam Hilokasya Pramanam Satyalokike Atajani Mayatubhyam Yad Avocham Ritam Mune. Shri Bhagavan Vacham Maya Proktam Hilokasya Pramanam Satyalokike Atajani Mayatubhyam Yad Avocham Ritam Mune. Shri Bhagavan Vacham Maya Proktam Hilokasya Pramanam Satyalokike Atajani Mayatubhyam Yad Avocham Ritam Mune. Shri Bhagavan Vacham Maya Proktam Hilokasya Pramanam Satyalokike Atajani Mayatubhyam Yad Avocham Ritam Mune. Vaishnavis. Shri Bhagavan Vacham Maya Proktam Hilokasya Pramanam Satyalokike Atajani Mayatubhyam Yad Avocham Ritad Mune. Shri Bhagavan Vacham Maya Proktam Hilokasya Pramanam Satyalokike Atajani Mayatubhyam Yad Avocham Ritam Mune. Shri Bhagavan Vacha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Maya by me. Proktam, spoken. He, in fact. Lokasya, for the people. Pramanam, authority. Satya, spoken in scripture. Lokike, and in ordinary speech. I wonder if this is the same Lokik that we have. I told him his name was in the verse for today, but maybe it's spelled different. It could be a different Lokik. And in ordinary speech. Ata, therefore. Ajani, there was birth. Maya, by me. Tubhyam, to you. Yat, that which. Avocham, I said. Rutam, true. Mune, O sage. So we have the translation. The personality of God in Kapila said, whatever I speak, whether directly or in the scriptures, is authoritative in all respects for the people of the world. O Muni, because I told you before that I would become your son, I have descended to fulfill this truth. So we can do this responsibly. The personality of Godhead Kapila said, whatever I speak, whether directly or in the scriptures, is authoritative in all respects for the people of the world. O Muni, because I told you before that I would become your son, I have descended to fulfill this truth. Okay, so here is Prabhupada's purport. Kardam Muni was to leave his family life to completely engage in the service of the Lord. But since he knew that the Lord himself as Kapila had taken birth in his home as his own son, why was he preparing to leave home to search out self-realization or God realization? God himself was present in his home. Why should he leave home? Such a question may certainly arise. But here it is said that whatever is spoken in the Vedas and whatever is practiced in accordance with the injunctions of the Vedas is to be accepted as authoritative in society. Vedic authority says that a householder must leave home after his 50th year. Panchashordham vanam vrachet. One must leave his family life and enter the forest after the age of 50. This is the authoritative statement of the Vedas, based on the division of social life into 4 departments of activity: brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. Kapila Muni practiced yoga very rigidly as a brahmachari before his marriage, and he became so powerful and attained so much mystic power that his father Brahma ordered him to marry and beget children as a householder. Kardam did that also. He begot 9 good daughters and 1 son. Kapila Muni. And thus his householder duty was performed nicely. And now his duty was to leave, even though he had the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his son. He had to respect the authority of the Vedas. This is a very important lesson. Even if one has God in his home as his son, one should still follow the Vedic injunctions. It is stated, Mahajano yenagata sapanta. One should traverse the path which is followed by the great personalities. Kardama Muni's example is very instructive, for in spite of having the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his son, he left home just to obey the authority of Vedic injunction. Kardama Muni states here the main purpose of his leaving home. While traveling all over the world as a mendicant, he would always remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead within his heart, and thereby be freed from the anxieties of material existence. In this age of Kali Yuga, sannyas is prohibited because persons in this age are all Shudras and cannot follow the rules and regulations of sannyas life. It is very commonly found that so-called sannyasis are addicted to nonsense, even to having private relationships with women. This is the abominable situation in this age. Although they dress themselves as sannyasis, they still cannot free themselves from the four principles of sinful life, namely illicit sex, meat-eating, intoxication, and gambling. Since they are not freed from these four principles, they are cheating the public by posing as Swāmīs. In Kali Yuga, the injunction is that no one should accept sannyas. Of course, those who actually follow the rules and regulations must take sannyas. Generally, however, people are unable to accept sannyas life, and therefore Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stressed, Kalo nasteva nasteva nastevar gatir anyatha. In this age, there is no other alternative, no other alternative, no other alternative than to chant the holy name of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The main purpose of sannyas life is to be in constant companionship with the Supreme Lord, either by thinking of Him within the heart or hearing of Him through oral reception. In this age, hearing is more important than thinking, because one's thinking may be disturbed by mental agitation. But if one concentrates on hearing, he will be forced to associate with the sound vibration of Krishna. Krishna and the sound vibration of Krishna are non-different. So if one loudly vibrates, Hare Krishna, he will be able to think of Krishna immediately. This process of chanting is the best process of self-realization in this age. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya preached it so nicely for the benefit of all humanity. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Maya Proktam Hilokasya Pramanam Satyalokike Atajani Mayatubhyam Yadavochamrutam Mune. The personality of Godhead, Kapila said, whatever I speak, whether directly or in the scriptures, is authoritative in all respects for the people of the world. O Muni, because I told you before that I would become your son, I have descended to fulfill this truth. So I beg the blessings of all the Vaishnavas, especially Devamrita Swāmī and Ram Roy and all of our other Amirya Vilas and all of our other devotees here who are very senior. This verse is a follow-on to yesterday's verse. Which Devamrita Swāmī did a very nice class on. I watched it on YouTube. I was unable to participate in person yesterday. This section is where we're segueing from where Kapila is offering his prayer. Kardama is offering his prayers to his son Kapila, and now Kapila is speaking. So in yesterday's verse, Kardama was speaking, and in today's verse, Kapila is speaking. So this is kind of the end section of this chapter of Śrimad Bhāgavatam, 3rd canto, 24th chapter. And we are learning about an interesting topic. Fake sannyasis. So, actually, there is a story. Everything has a history, including fake sannyasis, which we will discuss a little bit later. But for those of you who maybe didn't catch the class yesterday, Devamrita Swami gave a very nice explanation about the fact that Kardama left home even though he had God as his child, which seems strange, right? That you would have the Supreme Lord incarnated as your child, and instead of staying at home with your child, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you go out to meditate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he's not actually present there. You're just meditating on him. And of course, Prabhupada gives us the basic overall idea that one has to follow Vedic regulations, even if one has God at home as a child. Now, the explanation yesterday was much nicer, with the idea that Karda Muni, being in the mood of awe and reverence, or rather in the mood of servitorship, not awe and reverence, but servitorship, was going to wind up in a rasa basa if he stayed at home, because then he would be in the social setting of being in Vatsalya ras, while actually within he was in the rasa of servitorship, so that would have caused an issue. So this brings us to the idea here of fake sannyasis. So how do we know if a sannyasi is real or a sannyasi is fake? Maybe you're looking at a fake sannyasi right now. How do you know? So the question is put before our esteemed symposium here. How would you tell? Is it the color of the cloth? Any scriptural reference? Yes. Do we have the boom mic that's going to...
There's some basic things like in Chaitanya Charitamrita, or maybe, Chaitanya Bhāgavatam, Lord Chaitanya Nityananda made the household sannyasi who's drinking wine and has a wife. And I mean, to me, that's like an oxymoron. So if they're drinking wine, or if they have a wife, then we know they're not a sannyasi.
Okay.
That's two easy ones.
Any other? Lokik has something he's going.
My perspective is not that Shastri, but my perspective is not that Shastri from Chaitanya Charitamrita or something. But from my observation, in Odisha there are many sannyasis who claim that they are Krishna or they are Jagannath. Mm-hmm. So I would say they are fake sannyasis.
Right. So if somebody claims to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we can bet that they're not a sannyasi, or at least not a Vaishnava sannyasi. Yes.
Maybe also to initiate them in sannyas order, and if they are qualified sannyas, and then if they give their blessings and authority for such a person to be sannyas.
It's hard to hear. Can somebody reiterate what she just said?
They were properly initiated by a sannyasi and recognized.
Like look to the caliber of their sannyas guru,
Mm-hmm.
see if they have good standing as a sannyasi and within the parampara, then you could assume that if they gave their blessings in order for someone to become a sannyasi, that they also are worthy of that pattern.
Okay, those are usually some of the basic things we generally tend to rely on. What came to my mind was in Bhagavad Gita, there's a verse, Nasato vidyate bhavo nabhavo vidyate sataha ubayarapi driston tas tvanios tattvadarshibhi, that those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the existent, the soul, there is no change, and of the non-existent, the body, there is no endurance. The seers have concluded by studying the nature of both. So in one sense, this is how truth and falsity are sifted out, and not just sannyasis, but in any situation, that that which is true endures, and that which is not true flops at some point down the line. So that which is true endures, and that which is not true falters in some kind of way. Or as they say, time will tell who has fell and who has been left behind, you know. So if we can understand a person having, you know, managed to make it to the end of their life, and they have not broken their sannyas vows, then we know for sure that they were a bona fide sannyas. However, then they're dead. So this brings us to the important realization that the only good sannyasi is a dead sannyasi. At least then you're sure. Okay, we have a challenge here, so. No.
I just wanted to bring another perspective about lineage. Prabhupada said that this is one aspect. The sannyas guru is like a marriage priest, whoever is nearby. Of course, you can make it more than that, but there's the entry-level reality. Just like when you're getting married, you look at who's around, who's the priest available. So similarly, the sannyas guru, whoever is nearby, like a marriage priest. Now, certainly you can make it more than that.
Yeah, right. So, at any rate, we've all seen and we've all heard about various kinds of unauthorized, unbonafide, and people who claim to be sannyasis. And there is an interesting chapter. It's about one canto away. Let me go there. It's in 4th canto, actually. See if I, okay, good. 4th canto. 19th. King Prithu. It's 100 Ashvamedha Yagyas. So, I'll kind of recapitulate the story here, that King Prithu was the son of Vena. Vena was a very wicked ruler. And he was killed by the Brahmanas because he was so arrogant. And so they uttered hum, and Vena died. So they didn't have to do anything very drastic. And of course, later on, they churn his legs, and Prithu is born from Vena. And Prithu was unlike his father altogether. He was actually an incarnation of the Supreme Lord, and very spiritually capable. And there's a whole pre-story where the earth, even though Prithu was doing so many pious and spiritual actions, the earth still was not producing, so Prithu becomes angry at the earth and chases the earth. But the earth finally takes shelter, and after taking shelter, Prithu is satisfied. But later on in Prithu's life, he decides to perform 100 horse sacrifices, Ashvamedha sacrifices. So he's performing these sacrifices, and he gets up to 99. So he's just got one Ashvamedha sacrifice left to make it to 100 Ashvamedha sacrifices. But little does he know, up in the heavenly worlds, there is heavenly king Indra. And Indra has performed 100 Ashvamedha sacrifices already. And Indra thinks, oh no, if Prithu performs 100 Ashvamedha sacrifices, that minimizes my having performed 100 Ashvamedha sacrifices. So what does Indra do? Indra dresses up like a sannyasi, and he goes to the place where the horse that's getting ready for the sacrifice the next day is being kept, and Indra steals the horse. And unfortunately for Indra, things do not go well for some criminals. So Indra happens to be seen by Atri Muni, who immediately knows what's going on. And Atri Muni goes to tell Prithu, my dear Prithu, your horse for the sacrifice is being stolen by Indra in the garb of a sannyasi. So Prithu's son decides to go chase down Indra. And so as he is chasing Indra, he sees Indra, he's dressed in sannyas outfit with ashes smeared all over his body, and he's got this horse with him. And eventually he gets the horse because he threatens Indra, and Indra lets go of the horse, and he brings the horse back. And in this way, he is given the name Vijatashva, which means he was able to conquer over Indra, to retrieve this purloined horse that had been taken because Indra didn't want to be bested by Prithu. Now, Prithu, what's interesting too is that Prithu is performing this huge sacrifice, and the sacrifice is very popular. In fact, even the Supreme Personality of Godhead is attending this sacrifice, along with sages, and one of the sages that's attending is Kapila Dev, along with Dattatreya and Narada Muni, and there's the, all other kinds of heavenly attendants. People from various other exalted lokas are in attendance for this big sacrifice. And so everyone is very pleased by Prithu. And this is another cautionary tale about becoming envious. So Indra didn't have to worry about anything, but he was afraid that if somebody else had done the same amount of sacrifices as he, then that would belittle him and possibly eclipse him, and that person would be elevated to the position of Indra. Now, what happens next? It's an interesting story. If I can get my phone not to keep turning itself off. It's a new phone, so bear with me. When Prithu Maharaj was performing the last horse sacrifice, Ashvamedha Yagya, King Indra, invisible to everyone, stole the horse intended for sacrifice. He did this because of his great envy of King Prithu. Here's Prabhupada's purport. King Indra is known as Shatakratu, which indicates that he performed 100 horse sacrifices. We should know, however, that the animal sacrifices in the yajna were not killed. If the Vedic mantras were properly pronounced during the sacrifice, this animal sacrifice would come out again with a new life. That is the test for a successful yajna. When King Prithu was performing 100 yajnas, Indra became very envious because he did not want anyone to excel him. Being an ordinary living entity, he became envious of King Prithu, and making himself invisible, he stole the horse and thus impeded the yajna performance. When King Indra was taking away, this is the next verse, when King Indra was taking away the horse, he dressed himself to appear as a liberated person. Actually, this dress was a form of cheating, for it falsely created an impression of religion when Indra went into outer space in this way. The great sage Atri saw him and understood the whole situation. So here in the purport, Prabhupada talks about pankhadas or pashandas, same word, different pronunciation, about someone who presents themselves in saffron-colored dress as a way of cheating others. This saffron dress has been misused by many impostors who present themselves as liberated persons or incarnations of God. In this way, people are cheated. As we have mentioned many times, the conditioned soul has a tendency to cheat. Therefore, this quality is also visible in the person like King Indra. It is understood that even King Indra is not liberated from the clutches of material contamination. Thus the words amuktam eva, meaning as if liberated, were used. The saffron dress worn by a sannyasi announces to the world that he has renounced all worldly affairs and is simply engaged in the service of the Lord. Such a devotee is actually a sannyasi or liberated person. So, as this goes on, when the son of King Prithu was informed by Atri of King Indra's trick, he immediately became very angry and followed Indra to kill him, calling, "Wait, wait." So the Sanskrit is tishta tishta. Evidently this is the official Kshatriya challenge, that if a Kshatriya is running away from you, and which he shouldn't be doing, because it's against Kshatriya code. Kshatriyas are supposed to fight face to face and not retreat from battle. But if a Kshatriya is coming upon another Kshatriya who's retreating in battle, he shouts always tishta tishta, which means wait, wait, meaning we've got some business here. We have to get into it. So King Indra was fraudulently dressed as a sannyasi, having knotted his hair on his head and smeared ashes over his body. Upon seeing such dress, the son of King Prithu considered Indra a religious man and pious sannyasi, and therefore did not release his arrows. So here's something that we see, that within society, even if someone is not an actual practicing sannyasi or someone who is following the real role and duties of a sannyasi, such a person will be respected by others, even though there's no real source for that respect. And it's interesting that Prabhupada himself, I was just looking over the Lilamrita this morning, where it mentions that when Prabhupada was small, his father, Gaur De, would always invite various sadhus, and he would feed them. And these sadhus, Prabhupada knew were not really sadhus. And of course, when Prabhupada's friend invited Prabhupada to go up on the roof of Ultadanga Junction Road to see Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he was hesitant because he thought, oh, another sadhu. And he they were a very disappointing lot, is the way that Satsvarup portrays it in the Lilamrita. They were, in general, he knew them to be a very disappointing lot. But somehow or other, he was dragged up there. And then he met Bhaktisiddhanta and completely changed his mind. Here is a very nice, saintly person. The philosophy and the process is in very good hands with him. So This was the way things tend to happen, that people accord respect. We have also the story where Ashvatthama is being captured by Arjuna after he's thrown a Brahmastra weapon, which was intended to kill them all. But it failed because Arjuna was able to counteract it with his own his own Brahmastra weapon. And still, Draupadi was unable to withdraw her respect from Ashvatthama because he was the son of a Brahmana, even though he had performed such an inglorious act. So we see sometimes people are respected even if they don't really measure up to that respect. And of course, in the world in general, so many different kinds of sannyasis are there. But I want to leave some time for questions, so let me wrap this up really quickly here, because the story is interesting. It goes on from here. Being thus informed, the grandson of King Vena immediately began to follow Indra, although he was fleeing in the sky with great haste. He was very angry with him. When Indra saw that the son of Prithu was chasing him, he immediately abandoned his false dress and left the horse. Indeed, he disappeared from that very spot. The great hero, the son of Maharaj Prithu, returned the horse to his father's sacrificial arena. Doesn't stop here. My dear Lord Vidura, when the great sages observed the wonderful prowess of the son of King Prithu, they all agreed to give him the name Vijitashva. My dear Vidura, Indra, being the king of heaven and very powerful, immediately brought up a dense darkness upon the sacrificial area. Covering the whole scene in that way, he again took the horse, which was chained with golden shackles, near the wooden instrument where the animals were sacrificed. The great sage Atri again pointed out to the son of King Prithu, Indra was fleeing through the sky. The great hero, the son of Prithu, chased him again. But when he saw that Indra was carrying in his hand a staff with a skull at the top, and was again wearing the dress of a sannyasi, he still chose not to kill him. When the great sage Atri again gave the direction, the son of King Prithu became very angry and placed an arrow on his bow. Upon seeing this, King Indra immediately abandoned the false dress of a sannyasi and giving up the horse made himself invisible. Then the great hero Vijitashva, the son of King Prithu, again took the horse and returned to his father's sacrificial arena. Since that time, certain men with a poor fund of knowledge have adopted the dress of false sannyasis. It was King Indra who introduced this. Now here's purport. Since time immemorial, the sannyas order has carried the Tridanda. Later, Shankaracharya introduced the Ekadanda sannyas. A Tridanda sannyasi is a Vaishnava sannyasi, and an Ekadanda sannyasi is a Mayavad sannyasi. There are many types of sannyasis who are not approved by Vedic rituals. A type of pseudo-sannyas was introduced by Indra when he tried to hide himself from the attack of Vijitashva, the great son of King Prithu. Now, there are many different types of sannyasis. Some of them go naked, some of them carry a skull and trident, generally known as kapalikas. All of them were introduced under some meaningless circumstances, and those who have a poor fund of knowledge accept these false sannyasis and their pretenses, although they were not bona fide guides to spiritual advancement. At the present moment, some missionary institutions, without referring to Vedic rituals, have introduced some sannyasis who engage in sinful activities. The sinful activities forbidden by Shastra are illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling. These so-called sannyasis indulge in all these activities. They eat meat and flesh and fish and eggs and just about everything. They sometimes drink with the excuse that without alcohol, fish, and meat, it is impossible to remain in cold countries near the Arctic zone. These sannyasis introduce all these sinful activities in the name of serving the poor. And consequently, poor animals are cut to pieces or go into the bellies of these sannyasis. As described in the following verses, such sannyasis are pakhandis. Vedic literature states that a person who puts Narayan on the level of Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma immediately becomes a pakhandi. Then he quotes a verse from the Puranas. In Kali Yuga, the pakhandis are very prominent. However, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tried to kill all these pakhandis by introducing his Sankirtan movement. Those who take advantage of the Sankirtan movement of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness will be able to save themselves from the influence of the pakhandis. So again, we come back to Prabhupada's purport where he said that the only hope is Harinama, Harinama, Harinama eva kevalam kalua nasteva 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 gatiranyata. In the age of Kali Yuga, there is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way but chanting the holy name, chanting the holy name, chanting the holy name. So the story goes on even after this point, because Indra's getting ready to steal the horse again for another time. But what happens is that Brahma comes and breaks the whole thing up. And Brahma says, wait a minute, this has gone far enough. Prithu, it's cool, you've just done 99, just let it be. And so Prithu does. And Indra has his 100, and Prithu has 99. And all is right with the world. And Lord Brahma says, if you continue to try to do this last Ashvamedha sacrifice, Indra will continue to create new forms of irreligion in the garb of saintly persons. So this was Brahma's explanation, that if Indra would not be satisfied with having at least one Ashvamedha sacrifice more than Prithu, that this whole thing would just go on and on and on. So this is why Lord Brahma brought it to an end. But that's, if you're interested, that's Canto 4, Chapter 19, the whole story about the false sannyasi. So let me cap at this point and ask if there are any questions or comments or interaction of any type. Do we have the microphone disappear somewhere? For the sake of those out in YouTube land.
Thinking in the story of, Prithu, you mentioned, it seems like it could have been some envy there, coming from India, Indra. So, it seems like it's a prominent thing in which we're all envy. And then even in our society, like, some envy, jealousy, this devotees cooking so much, this devotees, lead such a nice kirtan. And why can I do that? Why can I do that? That's Can you explain how we can curb these tendencies and jealousy?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, the perennial thing, as the Sad Goswami Astakam goes, they were never, near Matsaram Pujito, they were never envious of other people. And that's not, I mean, it's easy enough to say, but to actually not be envious of other people, that's one you really have to work on. And of course, if we're struggling to hear the holy name, Krishna will actually help us quite a bit. And in one sense, you kind of, if you're serious about chanting the holy name, you come to the realization that everybody's better than you and it doesn't matter. And when you come to that realization, it's kind of like, it's one of those things that at some point you come to it And and at least for me, I forget it again and again. But at some points you come to it. It's kind of like similar to the realization of realizing that there is no security in the world anywhere. That the more you try to find some kind of a secure situation, the more you realize is that there isn't such a thing. It's a non-existent thing. And then when you realize that, you feel secure. Because you realize there isn't anything such as security in the material world. So again, with this idea of enviousness, that you come to the realization that, well, everybody's doing better than you in some way or another, and in many ways, not just one or two, but in many ways. And then there's a kind of feeling like, then you've kind of arrived, at least for a while, until you forget it again, and you have to come back to that rock solid realization again. But in general, by comparing ourselves to others, we are comparing apples to oranges. Everybody's different in very many ways for many different reasons, and although we do it, and it's common, and that's the whole nature of the society we live in, is that we always want to somehow or other feel better than other people. And we hunger for that, the Labha, Puja, and Pratishta, those six unwanted creepers that are masquerading as devotion, that Lord Chaitanya mentions in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. What is it? Jiva Himsa, not Jiva Himsa, doesn't start with that, but with, what is it? I can't hear you. Yeah, it's the first one is right, is bad behavior, which is, how is that? Nishidachara kutinati jiva himsana labha puja pratishtade yata upasakan, right? So, nisidachara, so bad, nis is the negative, siddha is perfected, achara is behavior, is not perfected behavior. Kutinati is duplicity, nisidachara kutinati jiva himsana, so jiva himsa is violence against others. Labha, puja, and pratishta are profit, adoration, and distinction. These six, Lord Chaitanya explains, are unwanted creepers that choke the creeper of devotion. They look like the creeper of devotion, but actually they are, again, like pretenders, or they're in a false dress. So we have to recognize them and constantly fight against them, because they will be our constant companions until we reach bhava or prema. You have a question? No, but
Hare Krishna. So what is the significance of animal sacrifice? You also saw Svāmī that is happening. Does the Lord get pleased when the animals are sacrificed?
well, as Prabhupada mentioned in the purport, the animals are sacrificed, but they're just being used as a test subject. That the animal being sacrificed is promoted to a new life within the vision of everybody in the sacrificial arena. So that's where these animal sacrifices come from. There's Ashvamedha and Gomedha yajnas, so sometimes horses, sometimes cows were sacrificed. But the test of the brahmanas being competent was that they could promote within the vision of everybody the animal from, one lifetime to immediately to another lifetime. And of course, if they couldn't do that, that meant that you had bad brahmanas, you had brahmanas that weren't qualified. And that's why in the age of Kali, there are no qualified brahmanas. So such types of sacrifices are forbidden in this age. And as Prabhupada mentioned, also sannyas is forbidden, but actually not sannyasis who are actually following, but sannyasis who are just imagining that they're sannyas and following some kinds of rituals, but are not really aware that they're four regulative principles. Okay. Arjun Nanda has something in the back there.
My question was Raj, we see that Indra was actually frustrated because he was insecure about Prithu completing his 100 sacrifices.
You'll have to come closer. I'm getting the double everything you say comes out twice, and it sounds like that to me. So I can't comprehend it. If you come a little closer, I can hear it, even though you have the mic.
Yeah, my question was that we see that Indra was frustrated because he felt Prithu is actually going to challenge his throne by completing 100 Ashwamedha Yajna. So now Prithu wanted to, of course, because Indra was frustrated, he actually was taking the wrong course of action. But Prithu thought, okay, let me correct him at this time when he's frustrated. So Indra wanted to correct his wrong behavior, but that actually took even more wrong behavior. So similarly, sometimes we see even amongst devotees, especially if we are in a position where we are asked to take care of devotees. Sometimes subordinates or people who are supposed to do services, they themselves are frustrated. Because of their frustration, they take it out by not doing services. They don't want to attend morning programs.
Right.
So that's like a wrong behavior. Then the person in position wants to correct that behavior by telling Prabhu, why are you not in the morning program? Why are you not doing your services? So he's already frustrated and he's trying to correct it. And then Prabhu, because he's getting pressure again from the top, again he does it even more wrong.
Right.
Then what would be the right way to deal with the
You are realizing a very basic element of human nature. And anyone who takes upon themselves the task of helping others become Krishna conscious, it's one of those things where it falls under the heading of no good deed ever goes unpunished. You know, that whenever you try to do good to others, you can also expect that you will get harassment in return for all your effort. You know, that's why Prabhupada sometimes said it's a thankless task. Also, we should just all remember the fact that you can't force anyone to do anything. And at the same time, oftentimes it's not a lack of conceptual understanding of what needs to be done. There's something else there. And unless that something else changes, just reiterating the concept of what needs to be done only usually entrenches a person further into the same ill behavior, you know. So sometimes it's just necessary to back off. And that's one of the things that is wisdom, to know how far to go and how to pray for some other approach to manifest. And in the long run, generally, my own experience has been that when you're trying to help other people, you only have a very little distance that you can go with other people by helping them by, you know, they have to really want your help and they have to really be requesting it. But you know, you can only go a certain distance that way. Otherwise, there's just a tendency to rebel. So, one thing you can always do, and one thing that's very important to do, is to, when you reach that point where you've tried everything you could think of and nothing changed, is to pray for people. because that puts you out of the loop of thinking about the bad behavior of others, which is by itself a very dangerous thing. Because the worst thing you can do in the world is to become preoccupied with the bad behavior of other people. And being in a management position is so easy for that to occur. So you have to be very, very careful about that one. And, there's the whole story about the, two brahmanas, and there's a dog that was, came and he was complaining that one of the brahmanas had hit him with a stick. He was complaining to the other brahmana. And the first brahmana says, well, let me go find this brahmana. So he found it, and he brought the other brahmana. He said, this dog claims that you were hitting him with a stick. Why were you hitting him with a stick? And the second brahmana said, well, he's a dog. I wanted him to get out of there. And the first brahmana said, well, that's not right. He's a dog, but he's got a right to a life just like you do. I think that this was unfair. So, Mr. Dog, what punishment should we give to this brahmana who unfairly whipped you? And the dog thought for a minute, and the dog said, well, I think he should become the Mat commander. And the first brahmana was a little confused by that. He thought, so, Mr. Dog, I asked you for a punishment, and but you instead promoted him to be the Mat commander. And he said, why did you do that? And the dog said, what do you think I was in my past life? So it's a kind of an instructive tale that it's a razor's edge. And you only got so much leeway. But if you pray for people, we don't know what it is that's blocking people. And oftentimes our resources are really meager, but Krishna knows what's blocking. And it's well within Krishna's potential to be able to change somebody. He knows what it would take and how to deliver it. So if you pray for somebody's benediction or benefit, then Krishna will reciprocate. So, and that puts you in a clean state of consciousness with somebody, and you can think, okay, I tried everything I could, I got nowhere. Now, unless Krishna delivers some new strategy that I hadn't thought of before, this is my strategy now. And so, at least from my own personal perspective, that's kind of what I've arrived at. I'm sure there are other ways to deal with it, but that's my own approach. All right, so we're getting over time here. So, at any rate, thank you all very much for your kind attention. All glories to Śrimad Bhāgavatam. All glories to the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna.